Hi, I'm Gordon from Camera Labs, and this is my review of the Lumix S 26mm f8, a pancake prime lens designed for L-mount mirrorless cameras. It's super slim, it's super light, but also super basic, and in this video I want to show you what it can and what it can't do, along with trying to understand its purpose. Panasonic launched the 26mm in May 2024 alongside the S9 camera at a press event in Japan that they brought me to, but I wanted to let the initial news and negativity die down a bit before fully reviewing it back home with my usual subjects. After all, upon announcement, the 26 became the most controversial lens I can remember. My own feeling is Panasonic set out to create the smallest and lightest lens that it could in order to make the S9 look like a full-frame version of an X100 and share similar vital statistics. And in those respects, it actually succeeded. The S9 plus 26mm is only a centimetre thicker and a mere 25 grams heavier than the latest X100-6, and even placed next to my older and slightly lighter X100V here, the similarities are clear. When you see this Lumix combination, you can't help but consider them a serious alternative to Fujifilm's bestseller, but with the benefit of a full-frame sensor. I mean, what's not to like about that? Well, as it turns out, rather a lot, as to achieve this size and weight, Panasonic had to impose a number of restrictions. Most obviously, the 26mm has a maximum aperture of just f8, disappointingly dim, and in the absence of a diaphragm system inside the lens, there's also no chance of stopping it down either. It really is just f8 and you're done. Secondly, there's no room for autofocus motors either, making the 26 manual focus only. Now this in itself isn't necessarily a bad thing, especially coupled with the internal focusing system and, shall we say, forgiving aperture, but the throw is too short for accurate adjustments, and strangely there's no distance markings on the barrel beyond the extremes to help you preset a range, and that's one of the fun things to do with manual focus lenses. Panasonic also doubled down on the size by not including a filter thread, nor even a means to attach a lens cap, with the frontmost element designed for protection. The inability to mount an ND filter is particularly frustrating for videographers though, as the fixed aperture means that under bright conditions you can't stop down, and you're going to be forced to use faster shutter speeds than you'd really like. Also, keeping the weight down means having a plastic mount with no weather sealing, although at least there are electrical contacts to feed back the focal length and aperture value, albeit always reporting f8. At this point, you'd be forgiven for thinking the 26 is a toy lens, and I actually think that's partly the point. I think it was made as a simple fun option for the S9, and in some regions, early adopters of the camera are even given a free one. Plus, more importantly, I think it was never actually intended to be the main lens for the S9. I believe the compact 18-40 zoom was supposed to be the kit lens, but unfortunately it wasn't ready in time. So with a fixed launch date for the camera, the 26 and the existing 20-60 became the unofficial kit lenses. Trouble is, neither are ideal for the S9, with the 26 being too basic as your main lens, and the 20-60 being way too large for this compact body, and I feel Panasonic really should have delayed the S9 launch until the 1840 was ready. I realise it's easy for me to say that when I have got absolutely no idea what's going on behind the scenes business-wise, but the S9's initially mixed reception, especially with the 26, could have been very different had the 18-40 been the main lens from day one. Or better still, I think Panasonic should have been less strict on the price and weight and simply designed a better pancake prime lens with autofocus and a respectable aperture. And it's perfectly possible too. Consider the Nikon Z 26mm 2.8 or the Canon RF28 2.8, both pancake primes for full-frame mirrorless cameras, both 3 stops brighter than the Lumix, both with autofocus, variable apertures and filter threads too. Sure, both are also thicker and heavier, but by no more than 7mm or 67 grams, and while they're also roughly double the price of the Lumix lens, that still only makes them around $350 to $400, so neither are exactly large, heavy, or particularly expensive. These are the kind of lenses that Panasonic should have made, in my personal opinion, and hopefully they or Sigma still will for the L-mount, but right now we have the existing 26 f8, so let's see what it can do. Physically, the 26mm is certainly impressively thin and light, just 18mm thick and a mere 58 grams. Say what you like about its functionality, but it certainly meets the goal of compact size and lightweight. Mount it on an S9 and you can see how they're a perfect size match, especially when I show you how large the 20-60mm zoom is in comparison. A Of course, you can alternatively fit it on any L-mount body, like the S5 II here, where it becomes thinner than the actual grip. I actually much preferred using this lens on the S5 II, as I find manual focusing much easier with a viewfinder than with the screen alone on the S9. There's just one control, the manual focusing ring, which is mechanically linked to the elements, shifting them back and forth in what looks like a single group behind that protective front element. You'll see the throw is fairly short, about 40 degrees, with hard stops at either end, labelled at infinity and 0.25 meters. Sadly, there's no other distance markings in between though, which with a depth of field scale at f8 could have made presetting a range easier. There is a line to mark the current focusing distance, albeit again not actually pointing at anything between the extremes. It's a pretty plain looking lens. If you're happy with manual focus, but would prefer a brighter aperture and an arguably more attractive design, how about adapting a vintage lens instead? Here's the S9 fitted with a pancake prime from the 1970s, the Nikkor 45mm 2.8 GN Auto. Sure, once you've added an adapter, it becomes thicker than the Lumix 26, but I really enjoyed having the brighter and adjustable aperture, not to mention a more useful throw with focus distance markings. If you're interested in this lens, I'll have a review of it on my Retro Dinobytes channel soon, and I actually already have a video all about the Nikkor 50mm 1.4 from the early 80s to get you started. Moving on, here's how the 26 looks when manually focusing on the S9, where you'll be using the screen alone. Notice the field of view vary as I focus the lens, indicating pretty strong focus breathing. I also have focus peaking enabled here, which is outlining the sharp areas in red. This is easy to see when you tap the screen for a magnified view, although again notice how the breathing may end up moving your subject out of the magnified area if it's off center. Here's another example, but this time on the Lumix S5 II body, and I'm first going to show it without peaking, where you have to rely on the view alone. Again, see how the breathing makes it almost look like it's a zoom lens. Within the menus, you can enable focus peaking and choose between a variety of colours. And now, when I return to the subject, you can see the red outlining that I've selected appear when the subject is in focus. Like many peaking systems though, I found this insufficiently accurate when viewing the whole image on screen or even in the viewfinder, so ideally you will need to magnify it for greater accuracy. If you're long-sighted, it can also be hard to manually focus with a rear screen alone, like on the S9, unless you're wearing glasses or contacts, and that's why I much prefer using bodies like the S5 II, where I can use the viewfinder instead. Let's have another look at the focus breathing. Here, manually adjusting from infinity to the closest distance and back again, where you'll see that field of view decrease quite noticeably as you focus from far to near. It's like I'm operating a zoom lens, which again is less than ideal when attempting to manually focus, especially with a magnified area. Okay, now for my quality test, which will be mercifully short given the fixed focal length and single aperture value. I'm going to start with my distant landscape view, angled as always so that details run into the corners. So you're looking at the Lumix 26mm at f8 as that's the only aperture available, and I manually focused it here on the S9. I took a bunch of shots with minor adjustments to focus and chose the sharpest result here. And looking closer in the middle shows it's perfectly sharp with a decent degree of detail. Let's keep the 26 on the left and now compare it against the 20-60 kit zoom here at 26mm on the right, but at its maximum aperture of f3.9 for this focal length, where you'll see them looking quite similar. But close the zoom to f8 and it gains a little contrast over the 26 prime, and of course it also has the benefit of autofocus and zooming. So now let's return to the 26 by itself, still at f8 of course, before moving into the corner where you'll see some details soften as well as some darkening due to vignetting. Comparing it to the 20-60 zoom, wide open at f3.9 on the right, shows similar detail, albeit less vignetting. Meanwhile, if you close the zoom to the same f8 aperture, you'll see the corner detail improving a little bit over the 26. It's still not pin sharp though, and I wouldn't say the zoom is delivering meaningfully better detail overall. Okay, how about a portrait? Here's one taken by my friend Ben Harvey at dusk, where the fairly wide coverage includes plenty of my surroundings, while the f8 aperture means there's minimal chance for blurring in the background. Taking a closer look in the middle shows a reasonable amount of detail, but here the ultimate quality is being marred by the small aperture, forcing the camera to select a fairly high sensitivity, here of 12,800 ISO. Plus, even when enlarged, you can see there's hardly any blurring in the background. These are the joint issues with a dim lens. Now 26mm does sound fairly wide though, so how does it perform as a vlogging lens? Here I am using it on an S5 II at arm's length, with the wobbles reduced by IBIS. It can be a challenge to set the focus manually in this situation, and of course it's not going to adjust itself if you change distance. Here's another handheld vlogging example, filmed at night, this time with the S9, and showing the minimal opportunity for bokeh blobs when you're at f8. Here the sensitivity was at 16,000 ISO. Now you may be thinking that your phone could probably match this quality, but it depends which camera you use. This clip was filmed with the front-facing selfie camera on my Galaxy S20, so I could see the screen. Better results could be had with the rear camera, but then you'd be filming blind. But when I switch back to the Lumix S9 and 26mm, even at 16,000 ISO, you can see how superior it is to my phone's front camera. But the lens is still not quite wide enough for handheld vlogging at arm's length. Just compare it now to the Lumix S 18mm at 1.8, not only comfortably wider, but with the much brighter aperture allowing both larger bokeh blobs and the chance to use lower sensitivities for better quality. But I digress, so back to my usual test, which means it's now time for bokeh blobs with the ornament. This was taken with the Lumix S26 at f8 from its minimum focusing distance of 25cm. Here the blobs in the background are tiny, and even though they're fairly clean and rounded, there's nothing exciting about this performance, and it is an effect that you could probably match with the main cameras on most phones. So now it's time for my verdict with some more sample images. The Lumix S 26mm f8 is the most basic lens I've tested for system cameras, greatly limited by a dim aperture that's fixed at f8, coupled with manual focusing and the absence of any frills including a variable aperture, filter thread, markings of distances on the lens, or even a lens cap. On the plus side, it is genuinely small and feather light at just 58 grams, so it will transform the portability of any L-mount camera. And if you're based in a region that gives it away or heavily discounts it with a new body, then it can certainly provide some fun. But I can't recommend it at the initial launch price of $200 or pounds. Maybe for half that, but not $200. Let's see what happens during sale times. But does it deserve all the hate? I think its biggest problem was unintentionally becoming one of two unsuitable kit lenses for the S9 body, with neither delivering the experience that camera really needs. I personally think Panasonic should have delayed the S9's launch until the more appropriate 18 to 40mm zoom was available. This would have taken the heat off the 26, allowing it to be viewed as more of a casual option. But equally, Panasonic could have simply made the 26 a more capable lens in the first place. Yes, it is impressively light and thin, but I think most of us would have been happy to sacrifice a few millimeters and grams and pay a bit more for a considerably more practical option, like the Canon 28 and Nikon 26 pancakes. Sure, both cost closer to $400, but with f2.8 apertures, autofocus and filter threads, they're so much better. And if you don't mind manual focusing, or might even enjoy giving it a shot, I think that adapting a vintage lens delivers a better overall experience than the 26. Check out my Nikon 50mm 1.4 retro review on my Dinobites channel for an idea. Ultimately, if this whole launch has taught us anything, it's that there is demand for pancake lenses, and I sincerely hope that both Panasonic and Sigma are working on more capable options for L-mount bodies. And that's it for another review. I hope you found it useful. Let me know what you think of the lens in the comments and what your perfect pancake could be. I'm thinking fried leeks, slices of brie, toasted pine nuts and some kind of crispy bacon, but your mileage may vary. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.